My goal for this video is to be able to subtract integers. Integers are the set of whole numbers and their opposites. Basically, they're just my positive and negative whole numbers. The absolute value of a number is its distance from 0 on a number line. Basically, it's the value of a number if you ignore the sign. I'll be using a number line to model subtraction. Here I have a simple expression, 8 minus 4. When using the number line, I'm going to start on whatever number my expression starts with. My expression starts with 8, so I will start on my number line at 8. Because I'm subtracting 4, I know that my number will get smaller by 4. I also know that as I move to the left on the number line, my numbers get smaller. So starting at 8, I will move to the left 4 spaces, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I end up at 4, which means that 8 minus 4, obviously, is 4. Here, I'm subtracting 3 and 7. Again, I will start on whatever number my expression starts with. Because I'm starting with 3, I will start on the number line at 3. Because I'm subtracting 7, my number will get smaller by 7. So I will move on the number line to the left 7 spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I end up at negative 4 because I'm subtracting a larger number from a smaller number. I end up in the negatives. If I had found the difference of 3 and 7, which is 4, I would have still had the difference of 4. I just had to know that I would end up with a negative because I can't technically take 7 from a quantity of 3. Here I have negative 2 minus 5. My expression starts with negative 2, so on the number line I will start with negative 2. Because I'm subtracting 5, I will move to the left 5 spaces, and when I do, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I will end up at negative 7. So negative 2 minus 5 is negative 7. If I had looked at the terms in my expression individually, I would have looked at this as a negative 2, and I would have looked at my second term as a negative 5. I know that when I add two negatives, I can add their absolute values and the sum will be negative. If I had looked at this as a negative 2 plus a negative 5, I would know that I am going to have negative 7. Here I have negative 9 minus negative 4. This time I'm subtracting a negative. If I start at negative 9 on my number line and I subtract negative 4, when I subtract negatives, my number actually gets larger because I'm taking away some of the negatives that I'm starting with. So if I'm starting with negative 9 and I take away negative 4, my number will get larger by 4. So starting at negative 9, if I move to the right 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, I end up at negative 5. So negative 9 minus negative 4 is negative 5. Here I have negative 5 minus negative 7. Again, I'm going to start on whatever number my expression starts with. So I will start at negative 5, and once again, I'm taking away negatives. And when I take away negatives, my number will get larger. So I'm going to get larger by 7 by moving to the right 7 spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And when I do that, I end up at 2. So negative 5 minus negative 7 is 2. Here I have some rules for some subtracting integers. Subtracting a number is the same as adding its opposite. So if I'm subtracting a number, if I look at it as adding its opposite, I can remember my addition rules and apply those. I also have that subtracting a negative is the same as adding a positive. So when I subtract a negative, I'm taking away some of the negatives, so my number will actually get larger as if I were adding a positive. Now I want to take a quick look at the 5 examples that we did using the number line. I have 8 minus 4. 8 minus 4 is easy enough to do that I don't necessarily need a number line. I also don't necessarily need my rules for subtraction, but I can still use either one and get the correct answer. If I were using my rules for subtraction, I know that subtracting a number is the same as adding its opposite. So I could have looked at this as 8 plus negative 4. And I can now apply my rules for addition. My rules for addition were that if I'm adding a positive and a negative, I can take the difference of their absolute values and take the sign of the number with the larger absolute value. The difference of 8 and 4 is 4, and because 8 has the larger absolute value and 8 is positive, my answer is positive. Here I have 3 minus 7, and it equals negative 4. We've shown how to solve this using a number line. I would also like to think of my rules when subtracting a number. I can add its opposite. So if I look at this as adding the opposite of 7, I will have 3 plus negative 7. Now I'm adding a positive and a negative, and my addition rule states that when adding a positive and a negative, I can take the difference of their absolute values and take the sign of the number with the larger absolute value. The difference of 3 and 7 is 4, and because negative 7 has the larger absolute value, then my answer will take the sign of that number, which is negative. Here I have negative 2 minus 5. My rule states that subtracting a number is the same as adding its opposite. So again, I can look at this as adding the opposite of 5. Negative 2 plus negative 5. Now I'm adding two negatives, and I know that when I add two negatives, I can add their absolute values, and my sum will be negative. Because 2 and 5 is 7, and both of my numbers are negative, I will have a sum of negative 7. Here I have negative 9 minus negative 4. I'm subtracting a negative. I can use either of my subtraction rules when I'm solving this expression. Negative 9 minus negative 4. Subtracting a number is the same as adding its opposite. So in this case, I will add a positive 4. I also have the rule that subtracting a negative is the same as adding a positive. And when I change the expression to adding its opposite, I am now adding a positive. Now I'm adding a positive and a negative, so I can take the difference of their absolute values, 9 and 4. The difference is 5, and because the negative 9 has the larger absolute value, my sum will take the sign of that negative number. with -5 minus -7. Again, I'm subtracting a negative, and my rule states that subtracting a negative is the same as adding a positive. So if I use that rule and rewrite this as -5 plus +7, I'm now adding the opposite of -7, and now I have a negative plus a positive, and I can take the difference of their absolute values, which is 2, and because 7 has the larger absolute value and 7 is positive, my answer is positive.